I guess I'm taking influences from a lot of different places. And I feel like the industrial sort of built environment is a big part of that. Like with my various projects sort of address that environment in different ways. I'm Julian Montague. I'm an artist and graphic designer from Buffalo, New York. My father taught art history and also design history, and I'm very obsessed with the poster as a kind of form. A poster book cover, like where you have a little bit of text and an image and like the way they work together. So for me, like graphic design, you know, that's where you do that thing. That's where you make those kinds of things. But I've also brought that into my art and kind of trying to like use that formula of like some words, some image, and like to make that work for my own artistic purposes. The kind of illustration style or the kind of image making that I do is usually very, I prefer sort of very simple things. Like I had a project previously where I like made these portraits of spider faces. In real life, you look at a spider face and it's like covered in hairs and these things. So it's like, what can you do to make this thing that is complicated, like simple but still true to what it really looks like? I think that's kind of interesting. And so with cars, it's the same thing. It's like, what really matters when you're looking at this thing? When Continental reached out to me to use these pieces or this style in their campaign, it seemed like a really good fit to me. Like, of course, it made sense. But what's also interesting about it too is they want them, you know, these cars without the tires, right? So the car is sort of floating there without tires. So I kind of like that part of it. You know, the tire is implied by Continental, you know, using the image in a way that I think is kind of interesting. I mean, basically it's a set of rules, right? So it's like that whatever I consider to be a light is going to be white, and whatever's like glass is going to be black. And then I don't want to show really anything from the body of the car if I can avoid it, except for like the, you know, what I count as the bumper and like whatever's happening on the grill. I want it to still look like the car, but with as little as possible. Well, one of the interesting things about working on this is just seeing like the huge range of cars that like left the factory with Continental tires. And in the series, like it's a, you know, range from the most incredibly like fast, sporty cars to, you know, really sort of everyday cars to these classics that, you know, I think everybody recognizes. I was born in 1973, so I grew up with like a lot of these like 70s cars around, and like the Dukes of Hazzard, like, you know, these TV shows where people were jumping cars over things, and also all the like the little Matchbox cars and Hot Wheels cars that I grew up with, my toy cars. So I think some like early design sensibility comes from these objects that you grow up with, and I definitely feel that way about my cars. Like even sometimes it's just like the color schemes or the curves, or like you sort of have this connection. And from a design point of view, I think there are a lot of good design trends that are happening like in the early to mid 70s when it comes to car design, like mostly European car design, where, you know, things are boxier. Like cars today are so aerodynamic and curved, but I really like enjoy these different flatter lines. We have a very different history than New York does. We feel a little bit out of the way, you know, and we're in economic decline for a long time. So this city, like many cities around the Great Lakes, people were leaving, industry was leaving. And so we feel very much like underdogs here. And a lot of people don't know about they only know a few things about Buffalo. I mean, they know about our football team and our hockey team, and they know that it snows here. But they don't know, like, you know, how nice the city is or like what goes on here. I decided to stay in Buffalo in the early 2000s. And I'm glad that I did, because I think it allowed me to see things in a different way and allowed me to make work that I might not have made if I were living in New York or in a different environment. Here we're in this sort of post-industrial landscape, and you live in the ruins of all these like huge monuments essentially, and which are continually sort of asking the question like, what are we going to do next, or what's the next stage? And I'm interested in being a part of that issue, that problem. I mean, who knows which direction I would have gone. I mean, I'm sure it would have been fine going someplace else, but I think I've done interesting things here. It's a very healthy art scene for a city of its size. We have a few big institutions, and that sort of helps to anchor things, but also a lot of great smaller nonprofits, and a lot of people that just put a lot of like time and passion into making things happen. And I really like being a part of that kind of things that are happening in a smaller place. It's important, for all these like smaller cities to kind of make sure creative things are happening. A lot of the work that I've done over the last 15 years have been big sort of conceptual projects that have lots of different parts to them. Like I have a project where I classify stray shopping carts based on the situations in which you find them. That's right. I use a lot of photography, but also text to explain this sort of system that I made up. But then I also, in recent years, have branched into making like what I call my like fictions, where I use the tools of graphic design to make like fictional book covers and record covers and exhibition posters. You can make the cover for a book that doesn't exist, where I made up the name and the graphic and everything. And it's a way for then the viewer has to kind of imagine it into being. It's, for me, a really interesting way of playing with a lot of different ideas and visuals, and then also kind of like using these, just a little bit of information to kind of imply a much like bigger world. In a general sense, some artists work where the material that they work with is the primary thing they're doing. And for me, I think of it more as like I have kind of an idea or an image, and that image can take many forms. You know what I mean? Like there are things I've made where I've made them as paper cuts, then I've made them as paintings, you know what I mean? And then they're existing as a digital file that I'm like posting online. And for me, like I think each one of those mediums brings something interesting to it, but there's some platonic idea above it that, you know what I mean, is the main thing for me. I think it's interesting to kind of play around with these car images and using them in different mediums, like painting them, and it's sometimes you see things in a different way, or sometimes it like just that kind of texture brings something new to it. But at the end of the day, it's kind of the basic nuts and bolts of the image are the same to me, however they appear.